What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video, and today we're reacting to Todd McShay's latest mock draft. And come to think of it, I think this might be the first 2-round mock I've ever seen Todd do. So excited to jump through 63 picks with you all. Hopefully you all enjoy. Hit that like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new. And of course, the most important thing you can do, leave your thoughts down below. Where was Todd right? Where was he wrong? And of course, who's your favorite team? And what do you think of the pick he gave your squad? Let's jump right into it. We've got a lot of content to jump through here. So start with the Panthers taking CJ Stroud. Noted this in yesterday's zero line ranking where the betting market shifted a little bit. It's a little bit back and forth. I do think Stroud kind of gives you more of what Frank Reich's looking for when it comes to a size and a processing standpoint. Not that Bryce Young is not a great processor or anything like that. I think he brings more pocket mobility and elusiveness than Stroud. We really only saw it in the Georgia game for Stroud, that ability to create off script, but also, kind of aided by having Marvin Harrison Jr., especially that first touchdown. But nevertheless, you want more in-depth thoughts on my quarterbacks, quarterback takes, definitely go check out my quarterback rankings already up on the channel. But Stroud, I think, does give you that prototypical quarterback that Frank Reich would lean towards. And then Bryce Young goes 2. So nothing crazy here, nothing like Tyree Wilson going 2 or anything. But this gives both these teams their future franchise quarterback. I think it makes a ton of sense from that standpoint. Carolina gets a fresh start, and hopefully can build around Stroud. And then for Houston, it's like you get Bryce Young, to me, the QB1 of this year's class. And let's see what Nick Caserio's been up to, right? What does this roster look like now that it has that future franchise guy, now that it has that, great head coaching hire in D'Amico Ryans? Let's see what Houston is going to look like for years to come. So a little bit of a chalky start. And then we have a trade here at 3. Colts don't play any games. And then take Anthony Richardson. I think this could make sense. But they also sent their entire staff out to go see Will Levis. So maybe they're trading up to try to get Will Levis. I don't know. I'd go Richardson just because I saw what Shane Steichen did with Jalen Hurts, and I think he can emulate that offense with Anthony Richardson. Also, I think both these guys are toolsy, traitsy, but maybe Richardson has the edge there. Also, probably a little bit of a higher floor than Will Levis. And I would just love to see Shane Steichen, after what he did with Justin Herbert and then Jalen Hurts, let me see what he could do with Anthony Richardson. Great size, great arm strength, great mobility. And he's a guy who, yes, is a phenomenal athlete, but is playing the quarterback position. He is not one read, duck, and run. No. He is going through one read to the next, to the next, to the next. And then it's like, okay, at last resort, I will take off and run. So this guy wants to play quarterback, so I'd love to see him paired up with Shane Steichen. Cardinals move back a spot, accumulate a few extra picks, and still get Will Anderson, an absolute win for Arizona. And maybe they could play the game where, they move back with the Colts from 3 to 4, and then ultimately, let's say the Colts go Will Levis, whatever. And it seems like, oh God, well, Anthony Richardson's still available, and then Arizona can double trade down, move back from 4. But here they get a blue chip defensive player and a difference maker, throw him in a rotation with, Cam Thomas and Najee Sanders, and all of a sudden that pass rush side is starting to present a whole lot of upside in Arizona. And this team, they just need an identity on that side of the ball. You lose Byron Murphy, you lose Zach Allen, and it's kind of Budda Baker plus whoever they take here in the top 5 or whatever they end up doing in the first round. And I think by adding Will Anderson to that defense, you have that cornerstone piece to build your defense around. Then Seattle drafts Jalen Carter. So a couple grade the mocks in a row where we see Carter going to Seattle. I do think he goes 5 or 6, and I could convince you of either one, because I think he's a great fit and a great addition for both these teams. Seattle has addressed interior defensive line by bringing back Jaron Reed, who Jaron Reed should not be anything that's preventing you from drafting Jalen Carter. But Draymond Jones, maybe. And edge is kind of the one area where they haven't added yet. So I could see that being where it's like, yeah, we like Carter, but the off-field concerns are still there. Maybe we go Tyree Wilson and address the one area we haven't added anything additional to. So I could see that, but Carter would be hard to resist here, just from like the on-field best non-quarterback standpoint. Just looking at the tape, and it's like, dude, you pair him and Draymond Jones up, and your nickel and your dime, your four-man fronts like that, passing situations, that's a quarterback's nightmare. Pressure up the middle, that one guy can cause headaches and nightmares for quarterbacks. 2 guys, Draymond Jones and Jalen Carter, creating that type of pressure, not an ideal situation for an opposing quarterback, right? Then the Lions do draft Tyree Wilson. You can easily flip these picks, and I'd still be relatively positive on it. I think Jalen Carter's a better football player. So to me, focusing on the football side of this, Carter would fetch a better grade than Wilson, but at the same point, they haven't added edge yet, so I could see that. And for Detroit, Carter would be an awesome perfect 3-tech to slide in between McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson. But here, different situation. And James Houston, after all, is 6'1", 240 pounds. I don't know how much you want a guy that small and light. It still weighs a lot more than me, but for an edge rusher, standpoint, he's on the smaller side. I don't know how much you want him on the field in early downs versus Tyree Wilson, 6'6", 280 plus pounds, 86-inch wingspan. He's kind of got a body built to stop the run. Now, that is a bit of a projection just based off of, what traits are there. Wasn't always a guy who played the run all that well in Texas Tech, but I think that's, Big 12 defense for you. It's the same stuff I used to talk about with Siaki Ika when I was higher on him than I am right now. I just don't think that's a conference that covets that. But we did see Tyree Wilson in year 5 really pick it up as a pass rusher, and you're hoping that momentum continues into the NFL level. And again, his size and length is rare. Because of that, he's going to go relatively early because he is a kind of freak from that standpoint and a body type that we haven't really seen just yet. So, again, he's going to get propped up and boosted up on draft boards, and you add him in opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. I feel like those two could be your starting edge rushers, and then you rotate James Houston, in as that third down, passing down specialist on top of Wilson and Hutchinson. I could even see a spot where Wilson does the early down, run down work, and then Houston rotates in for the passing situations. And then the Raiders select at 7 Devin Witherspoon. This would be an awesome addition to that secondary. A guy that I think, we think of him as a man press corner, but because he runs low 4.4 speed, we now know that after his pro day. Such good acceleration, great athlete from an agility standpoint. I think he'd be just fine in zone. And if you can play man, you can play quarters. And then in turn, you can play cover 6. And if you're great at man press, I can feel comfortable with you having a similar-ish assignment in cover 2. And then cover 3, I think he's going to be just fine. He can backpedal into the lane and read and react to the guy in front of him and play that lane. I think he's scheme versatile. And Patrick Graham's going to mix it up. He's going to run man, he's going to run various zones, and it's all going to be about the same percentage usage. So I think this and Christian Gonzalez will be a fantastic fit for that defense. Here they go with a bit of a quote-unquote safer play maybe with Devin Witherspoon. High floor guy, most NFL ready as well. So as the Raiders continue to try to show that they are existing and still alive in the AFC West, and it's not just the Chiefs division, just not the Chargers as the next team. Raiders trying to make some noise, drafting an NFL-ready corner could help them do just that. At 8th, then Christian Gonzalez. And yeah, I'm starting to think it's live that we get 2 corners in the top 10. To me, it's the strength of the class, which could push these guys down the board. Because it's like, what's the difference between Christian Gonzalez at 8 or Cam Smith at 45? It makes it there. Or Keely Ringo there, if you're the Falcons. I can see that argument being made. But Gonzalez paired up with A.J. Terrell, Jesse Bates is the over-the-top free safety. That's an insane trio in the back end. And then hopefully, in turn, that spurs some better pass rush growth, and we'll see what the Falcons do in the second round. If they go Gonzalez or corner in general here at 8, I think you almost have to go edge at 44 or 45, whatever pick it is. Not that you want to be drafting based off need all the time, but this is a deep edge group. I think you can get some good value there at 45. But we'll see once we get to the second round. Peter Skoronski to the Bears. Yep, it's starting to feel like they do lean towards Skoronski here and are leaning that way. And I get it. Probably the best blocking offensive tackle in this class on the move. Like I think that zone blocking scheme, Skoronski's probably your best bet. Not that Paris Johnson Jr. is bad by any stretch, because also zone blocking scheme at Ohio State, he can get out and move just as much. But I think Skoronski has him by a hair in that department. Shorter arms, so maybe he does play guard, and you're keeping Tevin Jenkins at tackle. But I would seriously implore that the Bears play Peter Skoronski at right tackle, move Tevin Jenkins back inside, and in turn, him and Nate Davis become your guards, and then Cody Whitehair slides over to play center, which he has done plenty of times in his career. So that would be my more ideal fit. To me, I would still go Paris Johnson Jr. here, but it's hard to knock Peter Skoronski as a good fit in that zone blocking scheme. Then Lucas Van Ness to the Eagles. To me, this is a perfect Brandon Graham replacement, a guy who wins with power, and that get off on the line of scrimmage creates an explosive bull rush right into the heart of a tackle, and that's kind of Brandon Graham's game too. So it's kind of a seamless transition of a guy in that spot, and also inside versatility. I'd wonder if the Eagles in passing situations slide him inside and try to replace some of that production lost with Javon Hargrave going to San Francisco. Still Fletcher Cox, but that's going to be a one-year deal, and I do think this is going to end up being his last year in Philadelphia. Just strictly my speculation there. But yeah, because of that inside-out versatility, I'd love to see how Philadelphia moves him across that defensive line. They're always great about putting their edge rushers into a space for success. Like I think about Hassan Reddick and how they were able to isolate him against tackles who struggled against speed rushers down the stretch last year, and then again in the postseason. What could they do to maximize Lucas Van Ness? I think this would be an awesome landing spot for the redshirt sophomore out of Iowa. JSN then goes to the Titans, and we're starting to see this more and more frequently. I had it mocked this past weekend, and Zero Line the same fit, and now McShay's doing it as well. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. He could be the clear-cut volume guy, and then you sprinkle Treylon Burks as both a gadget player, but also he's 6'3", can work down the field. He's not the fastest guy, but given that he's 6'3" and is a tank, he's not slow either. So it gives you that 1-2 punch on the outside. And this whole offseason for Tennessee has been, well, we had to move on from Taylor Lewan, so we lost a tackle. Now we got to replace him with another tackle. Oh, shoot, we lost Nate Davis. Well, let's sign Brunskill, and he's our replacement at guard. Oh, we lost David Long at linebacker. Now we got to find a linebacker to replace him, Azeez Al-Shaair. And it's just been kind of trade one player for another in that same spot. And considering they're moving on from Robert Woods, haven't brought in a replacement, I could totally see where wide receiver at 11 is in play to be that replacement. Nolan Smith into the Texans. I think he'd be an awesome addition just from like a culture standpoint. I mean, a leadership guy, team captain this last year at Georgia, kind of carries that leadership bravado about him. And I think pairing him up in an environment that's led by D'Amico Ryans, that is an awesome change. And what we've seen over the last couple of years where Houston's just not been a good team. And it's hard to turn around from being a losing franchise into being a good one. And sometimes you see teams struggle with that, and it's like you need to learn how to win games. As dumb as that sounds, it really is kind of it's a tough adjustment to make. But bringing in a winner in D'Amico Ryans, then in this case drafting a winner in Nolan Smith, I think that helps change that philosophy and that mindset and that culture a ton. So would love to see this type of fit, and plus the Texans have got to find an upgrade there at edge. So drafting a guy who, because of his alignment, we don't really know what he could have done one-on-one against tackles, but we do know high-level run defender and freaky athlete with a solid frame to go with it. Definitely a project I want to draft towards the top half of the first round. Just get Paris Johnson Jr., an absolute win here. My OT1, and you're talking about a tackle tandem of Paris Johnson Jr. and Mekhi Becton, assuming they do keep Becton. That's scary. But also, 2 years ago, Paris Johnson Jr. is playing at right guard, so maybe you could flip him over to right tackle, and it's him and DeJuan Brown, and then you move on for Becton. So options aplenty here for New York, but I think adding a tackle here is paramount, and that's pretty much been my pick the whole cycle for the Jets. So no surprise that it carries through here in McShay's mock. Patriots trade places with the Bucks, and the Bucks draft Will Levis. So Levis does make it outside the top 10. So we get 3 in the top 10, then Levis lingers to about the 14th spot. Not impossible. I go back to 2021, where we have quarterbacks go 1 through 3, and then Fields kind of lingers, and a team ultimately in Chicago that moves up to 11. And maybe something similar could happen here. And then this year, maybe there's the fifth quarterback that goes in the fifth round or in the first round with Hendon Hooker. Of course, in 2021, it was Mac Jones going 15. I don't think we'll get 5 QBs in the top half of the first round, but never say never. But for Tampa Bay, this would be really interesting. So, is Baker, is he still the starter right away? And then also, are you just completely out on Kyle Trask? Are you trying to flip him, send him to somewhere that maybe needs a backup, and then try to get any sort of draft capital in exchange for him? I'd be curious to see how they play out that existing quarterback room. But it's hard to deny that moving up 5 spots to get the potential franchise quarterback of the future is not tempting. And, I go back to did a mock with actually one of my subscribers here on the Two Old Guys Yelling Get Off My Lawn podcast, and we had the Bucks trading up to 9 because Levis was still there. And it was like, it's this perfect blend of both worlds where you get to reset and you get cheaper at quarterback, allowing you to kind of patch in and fill up the holes that are there on the roster. But also, like, Levis in a much improved quarterback class, it's not like drafting Kenny Pickett from last year where it's like, yeah, he's the most NFL ready. To me, he was the second best and second most NFL ready behind Ritter, but time will tell that story. But I could see where a team like Tampa Bay is like, well, Levis, he may be the fourth quarterback off the board, but he's better than any of the QBs that were on the board last year, and he can help us win now while also giving us a reset of the position, and maybe he's our long-term guy. And then it becomes Baker and Will Levis competing for this job. So I'd be really, really fascinated. 2 young guys competing to potentially be the future franchise guy in Tampa Bay. Baker's on a 1-year deal, so long-term they'd be more invested in Will Levis, but I'd be really curious to see what they do with their existing QB room if they did make that pick, and especially trading up for it. Then you're even more invested in Levis at that point. Myles Murphy goes to Green Bay. Yeah, this is a fit that makes a ton of sense. Murphy's kind of slowly but steadily fallen down my board. And it's not that I don't believe in the upside. It's just, I get excited about what I know about these other guys. So then in turn, the mystery that is Myles Murphy kind of falls down and lingers towards, teams that are like the Saints and the Bills, who are pretty good on paper and in previous drafts have taken shots on these super athletic, uber twitched up athletes. So I think Green Bay could do the same thing here in the middle of the first round. I'd love to see them go pass catcher, but if Brian Gutekunst is in the war room, it's probably not going to happen, right? And adding a Myles Murphy after seeing what they did with Rashawn Gary is really, really fascinating. Could they take this 6'5", 270-pound, uber athletic edge rusher and develop him? There's a few places that I trust more than Green Bay. Like Philadelphia comes to mind, but Green Bay is definitely towards the top of the list of, player development. So this would be a great spot for Murphy to land, and he doesn't have to do it right away. You still have Preston Smith, you still got Rashawn Gary and Kingsley and Agbury too. So you could buy Myles Murphy the time that he needs, and maybe by the end of year 2, just like Rashawn Gary, he starts to figure it out and then becomes a full-time starter for Green Bay at that point. So if they can work their Rashawn Gary magic on Murphy, that would be fantastic, but it does come with a little bit of risk as well. Commanders then take Joey Porter Jr. Long arm, big corner. Didn't run the 3-cone, which gives me a little bit of hesitation, especially in this cover 3 defense where you got to read and react, got to break on a receiver, got to break on the ball. But everything else, Joey Porter Jr. is awesome at. Great arm length, great size, 4.45 speed is plenty. And he's gotten better and better year over year at Penn State. So I want to hop on that, continued momentum and growth from a cornerback, especially in a Power 5 conference. And, only played 3 years of college football. It's not like he broke out at 24, broke out at 25 or anything like that. No, he's just gotten better with a little bit of age and a little bit of time. And, still young, so he's still growing. And then, obviously, Washington, who's that number one guy long term? I'll wait. Kendall Fuller's only getting older. Benjamin St-Juste, I liked a lot out of Minnesota, but has had games, but hasn't really consistently emerged as that number one guy. So take another swing of the bat here in Joey Porter Jr., who was in my tier 1 of cornerbacks. And then Broderick Jones goes to the Steelers. I definitely think Broderick Jones is more the offensive lineman that Pittsburgh would prefer. I have Anton Harrison ranked higher, but I bet if I saw Pittsburgh's board, I could see DeJuan Jones ahead of Anton Harrison. I could see Darnell Wright ahead of him, and I could see Broderick Jones certainly ahead of him. So I think they're looking for a tackle that kind of fits with the image that comes with drafting a Najee Harris. Like they want to be a grounded pound mauler, and they want to be, an offensive line and a picket's fence built of brutes. Anton Harrison, a little bit more finesse, a little bit more of a pass blocking specialist. Broderick Jones has that upside, and he's a good athlete. He moves well, and he's very, very strong. So this is nothing against Broderick Jones, but he is raw from a pass protection standpoint. 1-year starter at left tackle. So, Anton Harrison, 3 years worth of his starting experience, and you kind of see that in pass pro. Broderick Jones, you kind of see the inexperience. So would leave me a little bit concerned in that standpoint, but I think this is much more in line with what the Steelers want out of a tackle right now. And if they can find an upgrade at tackle, and then, hopefully Chukwuma Okorafor continues to grow, and if you draft Broderick Jones, maybe flipping Dan Moore over to the right side, see what he can do, and maybe that camp battle pushes both these guys to be better. If you find an upgrade at tackle, you start to get back to average territory with that Steelers offensive line, which is big. Line take Bijan Robinson. Would love this. Him behind that offensive line could be absolutely unfair. Also a great receiving threat. And he's just an awesome offensive weapon. And I want to see what Ben Johnson can do with Bijan Robinson. That could be must-see TV because he's a dynamic runner, both with speed, power, and elusiveness. And with the pass-catching upside, I can trust Ben Johnson's going to get him in space and cause nightmares for defenses. So add him into an offense that already has Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams going into year 2. We'll figure out what they're going to do with that third receiver spot. Maybe it ends up just being Marvin Jones. But there's already a lot of talent there on that side of the ball. And Ben Johnson's one of the best OCs in football. So I'd love to see what he could do with a weapon like Bijan. And because there's so many other weapons, you can't just focus on Bijan, right? Like he'll have some favorable matchups and be able to work in space a lot. Then the Patriots draft Darnell Wright at 19. And who knows if he makes it to 19. He's catching a lot of buzz right now, but this would be awesome for New England. You trade back, true Bill Belichick type of move, garner other assets, and then still get an offensive tackle here. That would be fantastic. Quentin Johnston's still on the board here too. That could be interesting. But draft Darnell Wright, who has NFL size and strength and 4 years of starting experience, both at left tackle, right tackle. If they make this pick, I would venture that he's going to probably stay at right tackle, and Trent Brown will probably stick at left tackle for another year. And then you have Riley Reiff as this experienced swing tackle, which is always a good thing to have. So the most important thing about this is Trent Brown is not going to be in New England's roster in 5 years. And if he is, I don't know how good he's going to be at that point. And then Riley Reiff, 1-year contract, not a long-term answer. Darnell Wright at least gives you one of those two long-term starting offensive tackles. So that goes a long way, not only helping this team now, but addressing a potential issue for years to come. Seattle then at 20 takes Zay Flowers. I mean, this would be like drafting D. Eskridge, but a better version of that. Great yards after the catch ability. Glides as an athlete. We also got that over-the-top burner element. I've even seen some people compare Zay Flowers to kind of a Tyler Lockett. So this would be kind of a fun potential replacement for Lockett. But the thing is, like, the reason I would love to see Seattle go wide receiver is when Lockett went down last year, that offense got a little stagnant. And teams could just focus on DK Metcalf. And then if Seattle couldn't win the game on the ground, they were kind of struggling. Adding a Zay Flowers or Jackson Smith-Njigba, or in round 2, it's Josh Downs or, whoever. Tank Dell, take your pick. By adding that other weapon, if Lockett gets hurt, you still have a 1-2 punch of the rookie wide receiver and DK Metcalf, and hopefully that frees up Metcalf enough to still be one of the best wide receivers in football, and it keeps that offense balanced enough, and it keeps defenses honest. So would love to see them go wide receiver somewhere in the top 100, first round, second round would be my preference. And Zay Flowers is not one that I've mocked. That could be really, really fun. Would be great in the slot, but I could also see where he's kind of a seamless Tyler Lockett continuation post-Lockett era in Seattle. Kalijah Cansey, the Chargers. I don't know if I've seen this in a mock draft yet, but would really be a fun addition to that defensive line. Gives you that third pass rusher. I like the Morgan Fox re-signing, but still he's kind of a solid player that they're getting on a pretty cheap contract. Cansey, with that type of explosiveness, you add him to the mix with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, that defensive front could be really, really a handful for opposing offensive lines. And maybe because he's 6 foot, 280, I've kind of pondered this with Cansey when he gets mocked to the Saints. Could he move out wide to play edge? 3-4 base. I don't know if you want a 280-pound guy, out there. And also shorter arms for Cansey. That could be an issue out wide. But in the event of a Joey Bosa injury or Khalil Mack injury, maybe Cansey does have that flexibility. I'm not banking on it here in a 3-4. I'm more comfortable with that in a 4-3. But nevertheless, adding some more juice to that pass rush. And if you find that third fiddle behind Bosa and Mack, who hopefully stay healthy, that's when this defense gets really, really scary. Then at 22, Quentin Johnson goes to the Ravens. So you get a combination of size and speed here. Also a great yak weapon. So if Lamar Jackson's there, you have a guy who you can give an easy throw to. Just get the ball to Johnson in space. Let him be a great satellite weapon. But also a guy with over-the-top speed. And I know they signed Aguilar, but that's a one-year deal. And Aguilar's been very hit or miss in his career. Johnston could be your insurance there. And I mean, that's his calling card. He can take a drag 80 yards to the house, but he can also run past a corner or go 80 yards to the house, right? Like he wins deep down the field and also underneath. And those are the two areas where you expect him to be the best at. And then Rashad Bateman's a great intermediate threat, or at least he was, and that's kind of what I thought he would be coming out of Minnesota. So I could see that pairing on the outside being a really good one. And then you still have Devin Duvernay and, of course, Mark Andrews, who's one of the best tight ends in football. Vikings then take Hendon Hooker, so we do get a fifth quarterback here in round 1. And my last mock, I had the Vikings taking him in the second round after a trade back, so that's looking even like an even better value. But we're starting to see this a whole lot, and I wonder if there is, where there's smoke, there's fire. I wonder if there's legitimate interest, or if it's just kind of a spot where a bunch of media analysts and draft analysts are saying it could make sense, or I wonder if they're hearing it. So of course, I wish I could talk to these guys a little bit more and see what they're tapped into. But it makes sense, right? You let Hendon Hooker sit for a year behind Kirk Cousins, let him play out the last year of this contract, and then Hooker takes over. And I think minimum, he could be a continuation of this, middle of the pack, solid, good enough quarterback, but do it for something far less than $40 million against the cap, right? So then you're spending more money on defense at corner, at edge, at interior defensive line, linebacker, where they've got to get better. Finding another interior offensive lineman, maybe finding another wide receiver. Like $40 million against cap, when that gets freed up, you can do a whole lot improving that roster. So it could just be continuation of what Cousins is, but by maximizing the roster around him. And Hooker, that's where I think he's best suited. And honestly, hot take here, that's kind of where I think CJ Stroud's best suited. That first contract, I think you're getting an absolute steal, a guy who's ready to win now. It can make an impact right away. And while they're cheap, awesome. You can do a lot of things with that roster. The question's going to be, does CJ Stroud show enough in that first contract? And then even more so, will Hendon Hooker showcase that, I'm 25, but after 5 years, it's worth paying this 30-year-old quarterback $40+ million a year, and we can still win despite that type of restriction it's going to put on the rest of the roster from a cap standpoint. That's going to be very interesting to see in a handful of years. Jags take Dalton Kincaid. This would be That'd be an awesome 1-2 punch, Kincaid plus Evan Ingram. It does give you two tight ends that aren't great at blocking. Maybe Kincaid can do a little bit more than what I've said in my tight end rankings video, and especially being a guy who can block on the move. I think he's a little bit better there on the move versus in a phone booth. But, also a great long-term Evan Ingram replacement. You're replacing one high-end athlete with another at the tight end position. So drafting 2 years down the line, I don't hate that whatsoever. But, Brian Branch could be a really, really fun addition here. Cyrus Torrance, also a player I've mocked a ton. So it's a little different, but also kind of harkening back to what we were mocking the Jags a few years ago. Giants draft Emmanuel Forbes, someone with great height and some solid arm length. But 166 pounds is a little worrisome, but great ball production at Mississippi State, specifically those 17 PBUs. You can't make that up. You can get lucky with interceptions, but PBUs, that's you breaking up a potential completion. So no way you can fake that. And if you buy into that ball production and you think he can add a little bit of mass, add a little bit of weight, and I can see where he's worth being a first-round corner. To me, he's more of a round 2 guy versus round 1, but I know it varies by the person, right? And for the Giants, need another corner. So pair him up with Adoree Jackson. Don't hate that fit whatsoever. Cowboys then take Michael Mayer. Yeah, it can be a solid Dalton Schultz replacement. Is it a round 1 priority when Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot, I think they can hold down the fort there. Maybe you go Bijan Robinson here if he's available, or even then, Cyrus Torrance is kind of interesting here. But I could see where maybe with Bijan gone, the next best thing is Michael Mayer to be a long-term Dalton Schultz replacement. Really good blocking in the phone booth. I also don't think he's that bad on the move. And I think maybe his blocking was a little bit weaker this past year at Notre Dame. But I would argue it's tough being the number 1 option in the pass game and then also being a high-level blocker. And he plays like someone as big as he does. Like, he is an absolute tank to bring down. And I think he's a solid athlete when the ball's in his hand. Like, 4.7 speed isn't crazy, but I think it's a little overblown, and people are acting like he ran 5.2. So I think there's even a little bit of sneaky, yak upside because he's a tank, and 4.7 isn't as slow as people want to make it out to be. Bills then draft Jordan Addison. It's like adding Stephon Diggs light into that offense, and then you can have him and Gabe Davis, plus Stephon Diggs, and that's your trio, plus Khalil Shakir then as the 4th. Or maybe this opens up the door to trade Gabe Davis. If it were me right now, I don't want to pay Gabe Davis. I don't want to shell out $15, $18, $20+ million a year to Gabe Davis because I just don't know if he's bringing enough to the offense to be worth that price tag. So Addison could be your Davis replacement, or he plays on the inside and Diggs, Davis, Addison, that is an awesome trio. And plus, this team passes enough, so it's not like drafting Addison here omits Khalil Shakir as a part of that offense. No, they're going to throw it enough to where that rotation is still going to be paramount and much needed in Buffalo. Then at 28, Cincinnati takes Deonte Banks. Oh, what an absolute value this would be. Guy that I've mocked inside the top 20 plenty of times. Man coverage upside all over him, but also 4.35, solid size, good arm length. I don't think that he would be a liability in zone coverage whatsoever. Plus, you have Chidobe Awuzie for another year, Cam Taylor-Britt, so there's no absolute necessity that Banks gets on the field right away. You can have Awuzie play out the last year of his contract, and then Banks figures to become a starter in year 2. So whether he's ready or not, I think he could eventually become a long-term starter, but I also think he could be ready right away and be better than Cam Taylor-Britt. And him, Chidobe Awuzie, could be an awesome outside duo for Cincy. Saints take Adetomiwa Adebawore. Inside-out versatility. I think this pick would be made with a thought in mind of him playing on the edge, potential Cam Jordan replacement, but I could also see in passing downs, he shifts inside and gives you an interior pass rushing disruptor, almost 34-inch arms. That's a huge plus, especially when you're only 6'2", plus the explosiveness of running a 4.49 and having that type of speed and that type of juice. Played a little bit more on the inside at Northwestern than maybe he should have. So I'd be really curious to see what he looks like as an edge rusher. How comfortable is he going against tackles? But that's where I think the arm length comes in handy and is a big kind of assurance that he'll be able to hold his own. Then the Eagles draft Will McDonald. Hey, I mean, they did just make a trade for a speed rusher and Robert Quinn, so why not draft one and have 4 years of control with Will McDonald? But you double down on edge here. Could they go elsewhere? Sure, but they're going to draft best player available So Van Ness is your Ingram replacement. Will McDonald is your Robert Quinn replacement. That's kind of the Howie Roseman way of doing business. Would I like to see them go elsewhere on top of edge, like edge plus something else? Yes, that would be my preference. Brian Branch still on the board here. Like, is he kind of not the perfect Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement? Maybe they think this new defense doesn't need that guy, but maybe that would be my preference here for Philadelphia. Then the Chiefs draft Felix Enudike-Uzama. Yep, out of speed, bend rusher, opposite of George Karlaftis. I love that compliment to one another. Plus, you have Charles Omenihu coming over from San Francisco. So that trio is looking really, really good. And Felix Enudike-Uzama might be a little bit of a liability in the run game right away, at least. I don't think 6'3", 255 is too small, but he doesn't really do a whole lot against the run at K-State, so it might be a problem spot at the NFL, but that's where Omenihu and Karlaftis come in. Big, physical guys who both play the run pretty well, and again, bring a little bit more mass so they can hold their own against, offensive linemen, in theory, a little bit better. And then FAU just becomes this awesome, souped-up, bendy DPR, which would be a great asset for Kansas City to have because they're going to be playing ahead a lot in games. And then the Steelers draft Mozzie Smith. I'm thinking about playing around with this idea in my next mock as well, just because Mozzie Smith stock's on the rise, slowly but steady, and it's like Pittsburgh really could use an upgrade at nose tackle and try to get this mean two-gapping, run-stopping nose. Mozzie Smith certainly has showed that at Michigan, with some upside of him being a pass rusher. So I could totally see where Pittsburgh's prioritizing that at 32. And then maybe, we went off to tackle at 17. Maybe corner can still be on the board at 49. It is a deep corner class, so maybe you could wait. Versus, the top two nose tackles, Smith's going to come off the board, and I think Benton shortly thereafter. So I can see Pittsburgh trying to get to it as soon as they can if Mozzie does make it out of the first round. Jalen Hyatt then to Houston, kind of a perfect Brandon Cooks replacement. Add that speed back to the offense. I think he can certainly play on the outside. A little bit slighter build for a 6-foot wide receiver, but the vertical speed is hard to deny. Pair him up with Nico Collins, and then you have Robert Woods be the volume guy, maybe out of the slot. I think that's a solid trio to build around with Bryce Young. Jahmyr Gibbs then to the Cardinals. My concern here is, doesn't Arizona need just about everything else on the roster besides quarterback? Don't we need to address everything else? I'd rather see running back be something they address, especially in a deep running back class. Do that in the 4th round. A guy like Roshan Johnson's going to be there. A guy like Zach Evans could be there on day 3. Someone like Tajay Spears could be available. Izzy Abandakanda could be there day 3. There's so many different options you can go with. Why go Jahmyr Gibbs here at 34? Draft John Michael Schmitz. I think that's a better move for your offensive line. And in turn, I actually think if you draft John Michael Schmitz here at 34 and then a running back somewhere on day 3, you will get more production out of that running back versus Jahmyr Gibbs running behind whoever the hell right now is the starting center in Arizona. Anyways, let's move on and talk about the Colts. Taking Julius Brents. My guy. I'd love to see him go this early. And I think he's scheme versatile, probably best suited in a zone defense. So putting him in this cover 3 heavy defense is a really appealing fit because, 6'3", 34-inch arms, and a 6'6", 3 cone. We're talking big, long-armed guy to get a hand in receiving pockets and then great change of direction skills. Kind of tailor-made to fit in that cover 3 defense. This is almost certainly something I'm going to steal in a future mock because I think that fit is fantastic. Also played in a zone-heavy defense at Iowa, then transfers over to K-State. So I think there is some more man coverage upside than what I'm kind of talking about here, but him in that cover 3 heavy defense would be a phenomenal fit. Keely Ringo then to the Rams, and hey, you lose a corner in Jalen Ramsey, you got to try to replace it. And here at 36 could be the spot. I've gone edge heavy, but honestly, I could totally see where Cam Smith, like he is here, is available and on the board. Keely Ringo, another one of those fringe first-round corners, is available. The Rams are saying, hey, who's playing on the outside right now? Yeah, that's a problem. Let's draft one of these corners, and let's get one of the guys that could have and easily maybe should have gone in the first round. Let's get that holdover value. So I could totally see the Rams going in this route versus edge. Keon White then goes to Seattle. Yeah, they prioritize athletes and guys that are big with long arms. And, Keon White, that size-speed combination, 6'5", 280, plus being a good athlete, that's the calling card right now. Plus, Keon White really good against the run already. And, even going back to his second year playing edge at ODU, 17.5 tackles for loss, made the second team all-conference there with the Monarchs. Almost immediately kind of figured it out as a run defender. And there were stretches last year where Seattle was really struggling against the run. So adding a Keon White in there could certainly go a long way. Plus then, what's the upside of him as a pass rusher? If I'm a team inside the top 50, I'm trying to figure that out. And he's kind of, year over year since moving over to edge, pieced together another aspect to it. So he's kind of just now figuring it out. And I could see where Seattle's like, yeah, that type of athlete, that type of frame, let's buy into the upside. Raiders then take Brian Brzee. I would love this. If he lasts until day 2, man, this would be a fantastic fit. I have been looking for the Raiders to find an upgrade on the inside for years now. Like, I remember going back to like the 2020 mock, and I was like, Christian Barmore, please, you need to be a Las Vegas Raider. Or then I think they were still in Oakland. But nevertheless, point aside, Brian Brzee gives you 6'5", 300+ pound, high-end athlete who immediately, I think, gives them an upgrade in the run defense game, plus the untapped potential of him as a pass rusher. Clemson moved him across the defensive line. Here with the Raiders, I think it'd be pretty clear and evident. You're going to play on the inside. Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, there are outside edge rushers. And if Brzee figures it out as a pass rusher, I mean, Max Crosby doesn't need help, but Brzee could start to see one-on-ones because Crosby's there or vice versa. And then by adding a third pass rusher, kind of like what we talked about with Kancey and the Chargers, that third pass rusher makes a defense that much more legit. And also, hopefully this creates more one-on-ones and Chandler Jones can roll back the clock at least for another year or two. I'd like to see him kind of get back to where he was. Panthers then take O'Cyrus Torrence at 39. They've done a great job repairing that offensive line. Torrence could be maybe an upgrade over Brady Christensen. And this is actually, I think, the first grade of the mock where I've not seen Torrence go in the first round. So a little fun, a little different change of pace here. And, it's never say never, right? No interior offensive lineman in the first round. We have seen crazier things happen. But Torrence could be a good way for the Panthers to keep a strength of strength. I'd like to see them add a big body wide receiver. Maybe a Cedric Tillman here could be interesting. But Torrence, nonetheless, could be an upgrade over Brady Christensen. So from that standpoint, don't hate it. Plus, like left side of an offensive line with Ikem Ekwonu and O'Cyrus Torrence. Yikes, moving over the other side of the defensive line if I'm an edge rusher. Saints take Darnell Washington. Very interesting. Very different tight end than Juwan Johnson. So Johnson could maybe be the pass-catching specialist, and then Darnell Washington's kind of your sixth offensive lineman. And, dude, imagine Alvin Kamara running behind Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle and Darnell Washington, who's 6'7", 265, and can block on the move with the best of them, and is probably the best blocking tight end I've ever looked at and scouted. So that could be really, really fun. Or even on the left side where it's like you have Trevor Penning and Darnell Washington. That could be really intriguing. So I have not seen this pick mocked to the Saints, but they could find a room for Washington and make that offensive line even better. And that's already kind of one of the better spots of the roster in New Orleans. Titans take Drew Sanders. I'd love to see Sanders paired up with Azeez Al-Shaair. Shaair could be the kind of coverage specialist, the little bit more certain of these two linebackers. Sanders, though, Mike Vrabel coming from New England, they like their blitzing types, and that's certainly what Sanders brings to the table. But a work in progress in coverage and run defense. But pairing him up with Azeez Al-Shaair could help him and could be a good mentor-mentee relationship. But also, I think their skill sets complement one another. Sanders can be the blitzing specialist, and then Al-Shaair kind of does everything else and gives you a solid tandem there in the middle in Tennessee. Jets for a couple of picks back-to-back. Joe Tippmann. Yeah, I could totally see this. We'll see what happens with this Connor McGovern. One's already signed. That was the former Cowboy Connor McGovern. Right now, the Jets have not re-signed center Connor McGovern, so this could become a potential area of need. I have mocked Luke Weipler to the Jets and past mocks, but Joe Tippmann, 6'6", it might be the best moving center in this class, or at least blocking on the move, that is. And for that zone blocking scheme that Nathaniel Hackett wants to run, he's kind of a perfect fit, so don't hate that fit whatsoever. And then at long last, Brian Branch, if he goes at 43, that's absolutely criminal. He'll be on the top 10 of my big board once I publish that before the NFL draft. Yeah, I think this would be an absolute steal. One of the best value adds for the entire NFL draft. You play him in the nickel, great. He could be your box safety, great. He could also play some free. I know 4.51 might scare some people off of that. I think he plays faster than that 40 time. So, yeah, wherever the Saints need him, wherever the Jets need him, they could use him. And they could still use one more safety as is, but they could also use a nickel corner. So, insert Brian Branch, get an immediate upgrade. I'd be happy with them taking Antonio Johnson there, let alone Brian Branch. Falcons then take Keanu Benton. Yeah, get a true two-gapping nose tackle. I know Grady Jarrett has played on the nose, but he's still, the main criticism about Jarrett coming out of Clemson was that he was a little undersized. So I'd rather not see him do that. And David Onyemata is a good run defender, and he could do it as well, but also maybe a little bit on the undersized size for a true nose. Now here's where it really gets fun. Keanu Benton, and then you play those other two guys at those 3-4 DN spots. All three can stop throwing at a pretty good level, and all three present some sneaky pass rush upside. Not really sneaky with Grady Jarrett. He's one of the best interior pass rushers in football. But Benton's pass rush upside's overlooked, and David Onyemata's had plenty of years where he's been a solid pass rusher, and that's kind of overlooked in his game. So, not a fit. I don't think I've mocked this yet, but that could really transform that interior defensive line for Atlanta. So, we talked about them drafting corner at 8. I almost think you have to go edge here. Keanu Benton, not mad about it. Prefer edge, maybe, but I don't hate this whatsoever. Then the Packers take Luke Musgrave. Yeah, high-end athlete. Maybe not as gaudy of an athlete as we thought going into the combine, but still a fluid athlete and moves well with the ball in his hands. Solid route runner. Presents another pass catcher for defenses to worry about on top of Christian Watson. We saw what he could develop into as a big play threat down the stretch last year. And Romeo Doubs, please God, let him shore up those hands and get rid of those drop issues because he gets open. He is a good route runner. Just need to see him get rid of the drop problem. I think back to I think it was week 18 against the Lions. He dropped the most unbelievable, undroppable pass I've ever seen. Like, I literally don't know how Romeo Doubs dropped that perfect throw from Rodgers up the right sideline. I can still see the replay in my mind. It was a dot from Rodgers. Anyway, long tangent aside, look it up if you can try to find it. But it's unbelievable. So adding a third fiddle, long story short, could certainly go a long way. And I think Musgrave has those sure hands where it gives you that safety blanket that Jordan Love might need for that offense. Next, the Patriots then take DJ Turner. This could be fun. And I think Turner probably a little small. So if you were to make this pick, it's probably saying, hey, New England, they've already shifted towards a more zone-heavy team. They're going to continue to do that. Great 40 time. An electric 3-cone that we have not seen, but apparently it's off the charts. And because of that, this guy is going to be awesome in zone coverage, reading, reacting. And he's kind of got that Devon Witherspoon ability about him where his mirroring ability is off the charts good. Great agile athlete, can go stride for stride with a receiver, but also has that long speed. So he kind of makes up for maybe being a little bit more slightly built with such good speed and agility and acceleration to go with it. So, yeah, it would be a fun addition there in that cornerback room in New England. Commanders then draft John Michael Schmitz, so we finally get another center off the board, so 2 come off the board here in the second round. Could definitely be an upgrade over Chase Rollier. They also signed Nick Gay to his guard center flexibility, so they're basically just bringing in more and more options to potentially solidify that interior offensive line. And also, Andrew Norwell, I think they can do better there. Maybe that's Gates, but also John Michael Schmitz. I know he's actually a little bit lighter than Luke Weipler, but I think he'd be just fine at guard, so maybe that is kind of the thinking here. John Michael Schmitz will play left guard, but nevertheless, shoring up that interior offensive line, I think it's definitely going to be a priority for Ron Rivera. Lions draft Jack Campbell. This would be awesome. This would be the perfect pairing with Malcolm Rodriguez, the guy who's a little undersized, but great in coverage and was a great story as a 6th-rounder last year. Pair him up with Zach Thomas 2.0, right? And he runs a better 40 than we anticipated, 96 percentile on the 3-cone. I love me some Jack Campbell, my number 2 off-ball linebacker, and I think potentially could even sneak in the first round. So to get him here at 48 would be an awesome value for Detroit. Cam Smith then goes to the Steelers. So these 3 picks in the top 50 for Pittsburgh turns into Broderick Jones, who I think they would love. Monty Smith, who I also think they would love, would be a great addition to that defense. And then Cam Smith, a guy that I think is a fringe first rounder. 4.43 speed, solid size, not the biggest, not the longest arms or anything, but just kind of solid across the board, but with really good ball skills. And you pair him up with Pat Peterson, I think you can do a whole lot with that tandem. Well, Pat Peterson isn't as good as he once was, but I think adding Cam Smith in the mix, Pat Peterson becomes your 2, and then you're kind of hoping Arthur Marlette can step up in the slot. All of a sudden, that secondary doesn't look as atrocious in Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay takes Anton Harrison. This would be an absolute steal. You go edge in round 1, solidify that, find a running mate for Tryon Shinka, but long-term Shaq Barrett replacement. And then Anton Harrison here. Pair him up with Tristan Wirfs. Anton Harrison is the smooth-moving, fluid pass protector. You keep Tristan Wirfs on the right side, which I don't really care what side he plays on. I think he'll be great on both ends. But here you can keep him in his, quote-unquote native position so far in the NFL at least. And you're giving Baker Mayfield plus Will Levis, a fair shot here because they did move up and draft Levis at 14 in this mock. So you're giving those 2 young quarterbacks fighting for a franchise spot to be that face of the franchise. Give them a fair shot by adding that second tackle. DeJuan Jones then to Miami. Hey, Ohio State runs that zone blocking scheme, but I don't quite know if DeJuan Jones has the movement skills to be a perfect fit. But on paper, this fixes your right tackle problem big time. And such long arms. And once he gets his hands on you, he's so strong, you're basically taken out of the play. Do think he could struggle with some speed rushers and whatnot. And Tua's not necessarily the most mobile quarterback. I think he has decent athleticism and can run. But I don't think that's going to be something that Miami is asking him to do a lot, given the concussion history. So you're not going to get a whole lot of that rush contain, where I think if DeJuan Jones gets those rush contain edges, because he plays in Baltimore, he plays in Chicago, maybe even Pittsburgh, could kind of give that, just to list off a few destinations, then I feel a little bit better about Jones, because, again, you're just buying him more time to get his hands on you and take you out of the play. Tua probably not going to give you that same luxury, but nonetheless, right tackle's been a problem spot. Brandon Shell's not the answer. Austin Jackson's not the answer. Liam Eichenberg hasn't really worked out there either. Who's going to be that guy? I appreciate Miami taking another swing of the bat with DeJuan Jones there. Seattle, Steve Avila. Yeah, this would be awesome. Guard center flexibility. I would assume he's playing center here because I think he can get better than Damian Lewis and Phil Haynes, but they're fine. Right now, the problem spot on that O-line is at center. And Avila also, in my books, the best pass protector of the interior offensive linemen in this year's class. So goes a long way to keep Geno Smith clean, too. And you paid him all that money, you certainly want to keep him upright in the pocket. Bears draft Zach Charbonnet. I could see Chicago going running back at some point in this draft, but I don't think it'll be in the first 3 rounds, if I'm honest. Maybe once you get outside the top 100, pick like 103. I could see them adding a guy in like a Roshan Johnson, who is very Charbonnet-esque, paired up with, the dash that Khalil Herbert brings to the table. That could be a fun 1-2 punch. They also signed Deonta Foreman, so could create a fun trio. So I don't think they'll go running back this high, but Charbonnet, kind of the same stuff I was talking about with Roshan Johnson. They're both kind of high cut, big, tall, physical runners that run hard as hell, and they have that one cut. They can plant their foot and then make a cut. It's not like they win with jukes and elusiveness and agility. No, but they can plant their foot and hit their top speed pretty fast. And also, like Zach Charbonnet, you gas him up as this big body, power rusher. Ran 4.53. I think that's plenty fast given how big he is. Brenton Strange from Penn State is a name that's getting really, really hot. Has next to no production at Penn State, which is disappointing. But when you watch him, you see a lot of the skills necessary. I think a good blocker, good athleticism, can get out and move. And when given opportunities, looks solid. He just doesn't have any sort of production. So different pick here. And, I totally could see the Chargers being in on the tight end market, whether it's round 1, round 2, or round 3. I could see them wanting to tap into this tight end class. And maybe, just maybe, Brenton Strange is that guy at 54. Then the Lions draft Sam Laporta. And, we reacted to the Zierlein mock yesterday where Michael Mayer was the pick at 18. I think, comparatively speaking, I'd rather go Laporta at 55 versus Mayer at 18. But I also don't think Detroit is really worried about addressing tight end. Instead, it's about fixing that defense. And then maybe if you can add Bijan Robinson, you'd love to. And then maybe if good value at wide receiver presents itself to be that other outside guy. Because it's Marvin Jones, even with him coming back to Detroit, it's a 1-year deal. So I could see them even prioritizing wide receiver over tight end here. But man, it'd be undeniably awesome to see Laporta in that offense. Solid athleticism, good pass catcher. Wish yards after catch wise, he ran with a little bit more power. He's always trying to kind of be an elusive guy, but that comes down to preference. But also don't think he's a bad blocker whatsoever. It's not like he's a liability there. So you're adding a solid blocker into the mix as well if Detroit were to make that pick. Jags draft Tyreek Stevenson. I'd prefer to see them add a guy that can play in the nickel. And that's actually where Tyreek Stevenson played at Georgia. Part of that's just because they had a lot of other cornerbacks that were already there. So he was pushed inside. Then he transfers to Miami and plays on the outside there. But man press coverage ability upside here. So I think he fits in, man coverage situations plus cover 2, 4, 6. Again, I'd rather see the Jags add someone who can play on the inside so we can keep Darius Williams on the outside, but nevertheless, also he's only got 2 years left on his deal, so Stevenson could be your replacement for Darius Williams, and kind of maybe even open up that door to move on from Williams even earlier. So him plus Tyson Campbell could create an insane man press duo there on the outside, and that's really the upside you should be looking forward to if you're a Jags fan and if they were to make that pick. Giants draft Josh Downs. You're adding another slot-only type to an offense that already has Isaiah Hodgins and Wan'Dale Robinson, so I don't really love this fit. They already have a lot of slightly built wide receivers: Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and now Josh. I wish they give me Cedric Tillman here at 57. Guy who can play on the outside and has more mass and can be that contested catch, X-possession wide receiver type. Downs feels a little redundant in that offense. Cowboys add Trenton Simpson. This would be a win of all wins. Pair him up with Leighton Vander Esch. Have two guys who present solid size. Trenton Simpson, 235, so he's not as big as Jack Campbell, but he's bigger than your Dorian Williams, your Diane Henleys of this year's group, and actually even bigger than DeMarvin Overshown, who I like a lot. But then also great coverage, sideline to sideline ability, on top of Vander Esch bringing that type of athleticism. And adding one more off-ball linebacker just solidifies that Micah Parsons can be edge full-time, which is where I want to see him play. You can drop back into coverage every so often, but he's one of the best edge rushers in football. Let that be his focus. Bills draft Riley Moss. I have not seen Riley Moss in a second-round mock. Honestly, probably all draft cycle, but good size, good athleticism. It comes from a zone-heavy defense at Iowa. And Sean McDermott, you're talking your cover 2-4-6 stuff. So Moss would be a fantastic fit. Granted, could they go linebacker here? Could they go interior offensive line? I think that would be my priority because you already have Dane Jackson, you already have Tre'Davious White, you already have Kyer Elam, Christian Benford, who may be moving to safety, but nevertheless, corner flexibility there no matter what happens. So yeah, I think there's other areas they could go that present better value. And also with where I feel like Riley Moss's stock is at, you could probably get him in the 3rd round. So I'd rather wait and make that pick. I do like Riley Moss in that defense, but I think you can wait to make that decision. Matt Bergeron. This would be a really awesome fit in Cincinnati. So you get Deonte Banks in the 1st round, some future cornerback insurance, and then Matt Bergeron, who really good blocker on the move, brings a lot of power to the table, and then just kind of solid capable player and a capable starter at the next level pretty much right away. So this is your Lyle Collins replacement right here, right? Whether Collins is hurt or he continues to struggle on the field, you have Bergeron in the building, waiting in the wings to kind of take over and maybe even just earns the starting spot right away. So addresses a huge area of need for Cincinnati. Then the Bears draft Byron Young, and he had a ton of top 30 visits, which I was kind of surprised by. So he may go a lot earlier than what I've had in some of my recent mocks. I've had him go as high as I think 50 to Tampa, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, but he may be going even earlier than that. 4.43 speed at 6'2", 250, 98th percentile broad jump. He's got a lot of those athletic traits that teams are going to love. And you put him on the end where the Bears desperately need an answer at edge. Maybe Byron Young is that guy. Eagles then take Antonio Johnson. Would love this. Kind of talking about Brian Branch at 30, saying, man, that's kind of feels like the perfect Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement. Well, Antonio Johnson can also be that guy, that nickel strong safety hybrid, and that's exactly where C.J. Gardner-Johnson was used in Philly. So he could totally play that role, but do it in a different way at 6'3", 200 pounds versus Gardner-Johnson sub 6 foot and sub 200 pounds. So different body type, but could certainly play that same exact role that was so pivotal in creating turnovers last year for Philly. And the last pick we're going to talk about, Jonathan Mingo to the Chiefs. I actually really like that fit. Someone who brings size, solid weight, mid 4.4 speed, great yak ability, and I feel like that was just the easiest way for Ole Miss to get him into the offense. Unfortunately, Jackson Dart wasn't as good as maybe his recruiting profile kind of set my expectations for this year at Ole Miss, so we didn't get to see Mingo do a whole lot down the field. But when you throw on the tape, man, he's got more than just yak ability. And he brings that outside wide receiver size and speed, too. So, yeah, maybe he could be the possession, the X, and a guy who Andy Reid can just do so many different things with. Because, again, throw on the tape. This guy gets open down the field. He wins those contested catch spots. He's good on those, fade routes. He can stack a corner. He can do more than just be a yak weapon. So I'd love to see what Andy Reid could do with Jonathan Mingo. But, everyone, that is going to do it for my reaction and grade the mock, too. The latest Todd McShay 2023 mock draft. I think this was a solid one. Some players who fall a little bit lower than what I would have anticipated. Maybe some names going higher than where I would personally go, but oh no, solid mock. I'll go 86 out of 100 for Todd McShay. Let me know what you would grade this mock draft down below, whether it's a letter grade, A, B, C, D, or F, or a number grade like I did with an 86. So, however you feel about the mock, let me hear your thoughts. And also, who's your favorite squad? And did you like the picks that McShay gave your team? How excited would you be if that were your 2-round haul for your favorite squad? Let me hear your thoughts down below. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It certainly would help me and the channel out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more football content, more draft coverage as we get closer to the 2023 draft, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.